Money. Everybody wants it. No matter where you live or what you believe, we all need money to survive. You might not say it, but come on. Who doesn't want a life free of financial stress and strain? And yet, only a small percentage of people enjoy true wealth and financial freedom. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, 2/3 of the wealth in the U.S. is owned by only 5% of Americans. Broaden the search and you'll discover that the richest 1% own 44% of all the world's wealth. Hard to believe, right? So why is that? We could look at more charts and stats, but they all make the same point. While everyone wants to be rich, few people are. No surprise, really. But what is surprising is that these stats don't seem to help us understand why. Why aren't more people wealthy? Why do we just accept that some are rich while most are not? What do the rich 5% and the elite 1% know that you don't? And how did they learn it? Two theories on this. First, you're incapable. Unintelligent, lazy, submissive, afraid, or just plain unlucky. I'm not buying this one. There's no way that 95% of us are inferior to a privileged few. Second theory, we are all victims of a brilliant heist. Not exactly like the ones you see in movies, but equally devious. A centuries-old plan that favors the elite and exploits the rest. No one sees it because it's hiding in plain sight. It's the system we live in, and what's most troubling, it's totally legal. The famous inventor and futurist R. Buckminster Fuller named it back in 1983, GRUNCH, an acronym for Gross Universal Cash Heist. The greatest heist of all time, executed by a faceless, unofficial elite operating to their best advantage and keeping everyone else in their service. Sounds like another conspiracy theory, right? But when you dig in, it begins to add up. How else do you make sense of such an imbalance? For the answers, we look to those who do well in spite of it. People from humble beginnings. Those who work around the elite and understand their game. People who took our shared dream of financial freedom and, despite the odds stacked against them, made it their personal reality. I'm Dr. Pedram Shojai, the urban monk. Sounds a bit strange to hear a monk talk about money, right? Well, when I came down off the mountain, I had to deal with money like everyone else. So I've set out to understand why it causes so much grief for so many people. To be healthy and prosper requires money. And most of my patients' stress comes from money issues. Most divorces are over money. Too many people today are stumbling on the traditional paths for making a living. Outsourcing, downsizing, AI, and the pandemic, to name a few. 114 million people lost their jobs recently, and fingers crossed, they all come back. But we need more than luck here. If you don't get the money game, there's a good chance you're being manipulated. We need to even the playing field, boost our financial IQ, and get our fair share of financial success.
I am a fourth generation Japanese American, which is my way of saying I don't speak Japanese. And I was born on Oahu in Honolulu, but my father was transferred to an outer island, the big island of Hawaii. It's the southernmost part of the United States. The story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad begins when I moved across town from not a poor part of town, but it wasn't rich, I would say. It was very, very working class, mostly Japanese, Chinese, and Filipinos. I don't know why, but we moved across town, and suddenly I was in a school for rich kids. So across the street was the school for the plantation kids. So our family, from my mother's side and my father's side, came over to work the sugar plantations. And I went to Riverside School where the rich white kids went to school. And the world was so far apart just in this one street. And I realized for the first time I was poor, so I'm 9 years old. And the reason I knew I was poor because my classmates had new bicycles. And my father, bless his heart, he was a school teacher. He was head of education. But he bought me this, I still remember this blue bicycle. I took my life in my hands every time I rode that bicycle. It fell apart, the chain came off, the pedals fell off, but it was $5. I still remember the price. I'm going, and my kids have these brand new Schwinn's and all that stuff, So finally I realized, I raised my hand and I asked my school teacher, and I said, when are we going to learn about money? She goes, and she sounded like church lady, Dana Carvey, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I said, wait a minute, when am I going to learn about money? And she just kept giving me this church line. And I said, what the hell? And finally I said, why don't we learn about money? She says, you're here to get a job. And I said, but isn't the end product of a job is the money? She goes, yeah. I said, so what? Let me just skip the job and get to the money. And I was a pest. So that's why I kept pestering my teacher. When am I going to learn about money? And then finally she said to me, why don't you go ask your father? After all, he's my boss. Why don't you ask him why we don't learn about money? And I said, well, that's a good idea. So I go home and I ask the old man, I said, when am I going to learn about money? Same answer. And finally he just blurted it out. And this, I still remember, he says, the government does not allow us to teach the subject of money.
The education heist, I believe, is the idea that certain people at the top are going to dictate what the populace learns. And I don't believe that the populace is being taught what they need to succeed in our economy. I think there's an intentional effort to keep things at a lower level so that people do not threaten the elites.
It's staggering the complete lack of financial education in America today, whether it's at the high school level, the college level, or even for adults.
And too many people don't question what the school system is teaching. They don't question what the university professor is saying. They just go along. But you got to start thinking for yourself. You got to start questioning everything.
And there are just certain things in life that are best taught through mentors, through practice, through experiencing it, as opposed to just the academic. And I might give my son a book on how to swim, and he sees the pictures of the different strokes, and he could even pass a written test, get 100%, get an A. Can't swim.
Sometimes I think the reason why money wasn't taught to me in my neighborhood, in my sphere, where I grew up, was because we always thought money was too far-fetched. It was out of reach. Only the white people on TV had money. Only the neighborhoods that I didn't grow up had money. And it was never going to be a part of my future.
I hated school. Like, well, I'm not interested in that. And, I didn't learn I was stupid until I went to school. As a kid, it's horrible. The F's on, big red F's, and you did this wrong and that wrong. And so I didn't like it. I hated it. So I rebelled.
Now, how often have I used a quadratic equation? Never. I've never used a quadratic equation. Why did I struggle in school with this algebra that I've never used? Why couldn't I have been taught financial education? Is it something that the teachers union don't want in the system? I don't think so. They probably have to teach it to their kids at home. Why not teach it in the school system? So it's beyond me why we don't teach this in our school system today.
So what happens is that the school system that we operate from came from Prussia, Chancellor Bismarck. Back in the day when he was trying to conquer all of Europe, needed soldiers. And so how do you get soldiers indoctrinated to be willing to take these kids and move them into the line of fire? Well, they create a system. It was called kindergarten. Kinder, children, garden, place where you grow children. And so systematically what happened was that these people were prepared to go into battle and be good, do as you're told, don't make mistakes, do the right thing, don't argue, and get the job done. Now, these kids did great results. They did great in math and history and all this, and everybody around the world went to model that system. So that system is the one we still use today.
Schooling that produced armies of soldiers will now produce armies of workers. The focus is on obedience and behaviors that make for dependent and dependable employees. Over the years, wealthy industrialists helped shape this system, donating hundreds of millions of dollars to public education. John D. Rockefeller says, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." Obviously, there's been changes since then, but this is still the foundation for American public education.
I've heard studies that only 20% of kids learn the way the school system teaches. 80% of us don't learn that way. So 80% of kids are coming out bored and labeled stupid and all, which is, I think, the biggest crime of all, because I believe we all have a genius in us, but the school system doesn't know how to nurture that genius. So kids come out of school who think they're smart, but they're really not. Or kids come out of school thinking they're dumb, but they're really not.
Every person listening to us today is infinite. You have an imagination. God gave you this imagination. Fuller said every one of us is born geniuses until we go to school. We're de-geniusized. We're told to get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and give your money to Wall Street. So every one of us has this genius, but we don't know how to convert our genius, our imagination, because we don't have the knowledge to turn it into an asset that can be sold to the world.
The heist of the education system led the way for other major money heists because people were taught nothing about money in school.
If we don't play it forward, if we don't offer people another view of money, of business, of society, of collaboration, of teamwork, of thinking for yourself, of problem solving, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? My fourth grade teacher wasn't doing it. My college professor wasn't doing it. And right now, my son's a freshman at Ohio State University. His professors certainly aren't doing it.
The thing about money is the sooner you're educated and the more you participate in learning about how money works, and particularly what works for you in terms of preserving and growing your own money, whatever that might be, the sooner you start, the better you are.
So there's an opportunity right now, which is exciting. And the exciting opportunity is an opportunity to unleash true human spirit by providing financial education, which is the one piece that is conspicuously, mysteriously, almost from a conspiracy perspective, left out of the system. Why? You have to ask yourself why. Why would something that is so critical, if we go out every day to make money, why are we not taught about money? We're not. We're just taught to be good, do as you're told, don't make mistakes.
What's embedded in a person's mind, the person that makes the most mistake is stupid. Yet in real life, in our world, the person that makes most mistakes and learns from it gets smarter. You know, a baby learns to walk by falling down, standing up, falling down, standing up. Then after they can walk, next thing they want is a bicycle, you know? And then they fall off, but that's how we learn.
I was afraid of that red ink pen that would mark an F if I got answers wrong. And of course, that was playing in the back of my mind. I can't fail. I shouldn't fail. And I had a lot of fear of failing. And then I learned as an entrepreneur, that's how you succeed. You fail forward. The definition of success is one failure piled on top of another. So it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, it's called the learning curve.
When a person is taught not to make mistakes, they freeze. They get paralyzed. They cling to a job making nothing. But they're terrified of failing. They're terrified of not having that paycheck, a pension, health insurance, and all that. It paralyzes them.
Higher education also has the financial support of the wealthy elite. No guesswork about who it comes from. Stanford University, Carnegie Mellon University, Vanderbilt University. John D. Rockefeller funded the University of Chicago without putting his name on it.
Many of the universities were started by these wealthy families. And it seems to be, I could be wrong, but it seems to be in the studies that we've done that these wealthy individuals were looking to create great employees. They would take the brightest and the best and put them into their business.
Could what most of us were taught is the right track actually be the wrong track for wealth? How did this whole rat race begin, and why keep it running if only a few benefit from it? For over 200,000 years, the first modern humans live as hunter-gatherers. In groups of 20 to 100, they're constantly on the move, chasing after the herds, finding edible plants, nuts, and berries. We live this way for hundreds of thousands of years. Then, around 10,000 BC, the agricultural revolution. People begin to stay put. Grow food, raise livestock, build a home. Family lifestyle replaces communal living. Survival now depends on having fertile land and natural resources. More land means security, surplus food for a drought season, or to barter for goods. Prosperity is born of self-interest and competition. This is where the game changes. Merchants, banks, and currencies spring up to promote trade. Private property, organized religion, government, and boundaries are introduced to manage all this, giving rise to chiefs, kings, and emperors. Class distinctions emerge: rulers, lords, and peasants. You see where this is going, right? Inequality, wealth disparity, the emergence of an elite. The fates of many now subject to the will of a few. (1787), the U.S. Constitution is signed. Our founding fathers are the elite of the day. Fast forward to 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve, the central bank that controls U.S. monetary policy. The Fed is the brainchild of a U.S. senator and executives from the wealthiest banks of the day.
It certainly seems to be that there are a few very wealthy families over eons of time that have been controlling things.
They got together in a train car at Jekyll Island years ago and said, we got to put these new banks that are coming up out west out of business because they're taking our business away from us. That was the premise, to create a cartel, if you will, of being able to control the banking system and to be able to control the money supply.
Most people think the Federal Reserve is a bank. It is not, and it certainly doesn't have reserves.
It's not federal. It's not a reserve. It's a privately held company.
It's not federal, and it's not a bank. Okay, so it's neither of those two things, right?
So the Federal Reserve is actually a Federal Reserve system of 12 reserve banks. So the idea was for banks that would keep money flowing around if there was a problem, and it was sold to the American public as well. Therefore, your local bank, your region will have money, and it won't just sort of sit in Wall Street and not get to you if there's a problem. Now, in practice, that's not what's happened over the years. In practice, the Federal Reserve has helped Wall Street. Why? Because of the way it was actually structured. It's actually structured as a corporation, and by that I mean that there are certain shares that the biggest banks own in the Federal Reserve, and it's called an ownership of capital stock. So big banks, more shares, little banks, less shares. Then you get to see a little bit more of who has the power in terms of the Federal Reserve. And so if there's a problem now on Wall Street or with a big bank, technically that bank has ownership in a company that can electronically create money, which the Federal Reserve can do and does, in order to help it solve whatever monetary problem it might have. Now, it's situated in Washington, so the other piece of the Federal Reserve is that its budget actually comes from the government. And so there's a very, very strong political connection there. Also, their budget, everything from their pens to their chairs to their travel expense accounts to their utility bills, are all paid for by taxpayers.
So let me get this straight. The Fed is a private corporation with banks as shareholders. The bigger the bank, the more power it has. The board is chosen by government, and its operating costs are paid for by our taxes. The Fed prints as much money as it likes, raises or lowers interest rates as it sees fit. But the question is, sees fit for whom? Taxpayers? Wall Street? The banks? Is it me, or did we all just fall down this rabbit hole together?
I think our government makes money, the topic of money, so complicated that people don't understand it. So all they know is to go to work, draw a paycheck, invest in a 401k or stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, and they think that's how they're going to make money. We're not taught how to work outside that box, outside of that system. So there's a huge heist when people don't understand what goes into actually their money being put somewhere where they have no control over.
I don't know about conspiracy, but I do know that it's in the self-interest of businesses, politicians, and governments to have a society that is compliant, that does what it's told and goes in the direction that it needs to. It allows you to maintain control.
Are we that compliant in this, assuming that money matters are too complicated and over our heads? Do they really need to be? We're living with a financial system that only a few understand. By not making financial education a priority, maybe we're just heisting ourselves.
Well, let's go back into what is real financial education? Real financial education, you have to understand history. It was August 15th, 1971. Nixon comes on, interrupts Bonanza, the most popular show in America. And he says, "Hey, sports fans, I'm taking the dollar off the gold standard."
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
And my rich dad sent me a letter. Watch out, President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Well, basically, on August 15, 1971, our money became fake money, toxic money. So the US dollar is measurable, it's exchangeable, but doesn't store value because they print it. It's debt.
They are able to issue these notes and demand their surrender. And if the surrender doesn't happen, they throw you in prison.
The idea of modern monetary theory has a simplicity to it. Create money when you need it. The government can just basically create money when it needs to. And so technically you don't need taxes. Now that's not what they're talking about, because the same people that are supportive of modern monetary theory are also supportive of more progressive taxes and actually bringing more money into the government. But the theory itself doesn't actually rely on that.
So MMT is a heist. It is authoritarian. No longer is your money representative by something of value. You know, a deed represents a home. A stock certificate represents ownership in a company. Well, what does your paper money represent? In 1971, it's no longer representing gold. Now it's a blank piece of paper whose only Power and value comes by authority of someone else under threat of surrendering it or go to jail. It's a heist.
When people get that first paycheck, right, they're excited to get the first paycheck. They're going to buy something that they've always wanted, and then they see that the government takes out taxes and payroll taxes, and that paycheck is much less than we expected.
If I'm supposed to work for money, and then they take 40% of it off the top as an employee, then I go to the gas pump and I look at gas is only, I'm just making up these numbers, $2, but it's really $2.50 because they're taxing me 50 cents a gallon. And then I go buy some food and there's sales tax on that. And then I go register my car and it's like, they're taxing me all over the place. This is a heist.
Even if somebody says, I know I need to pay my taxes, that's the privilege of a civilized society, people hate paying taxes. I mean, everybody in their heart hates the idea that the money they earn, part of it's going somewhere that they don't have control over what happens to it.
And that's part of the money heist, keeping people in the dark about the nature of money and the nature of government's involvement in the economy.
And the sad thing is when you look at the school system points people in a direction where they say the most successful you can be is a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And that's actually pointing you into the direction of the highest taxes that there are. The entrepreneurs that risk, that build businesses, that hire other taxpayers to work for them, that use leverage and take risk and debt, that's what the government wants us to do. And so when a person looks at the tax code, if you want to avoid the heist, find out what the government wants you to do and do it.
If you spend the money, on yourself, in other words, if you're selfish and spend the money on yourself and don't put that money to use, then what happens is that you get taxed. We effectively have a consumption tax. If you consume the income, you pay tax. If you put the money back into the economy, you're going to pay very little, and frankly, you can get to what I like to call tax-free wealth.
In terms of taxes, again, as an entrepreneur, if you are not an entrepreneur in the coming years, you're going to get pounded in taxes. I mean, the evidence is so crystal clear.
So what's killing the working class people who work for money? Taxes and debt.
The bank heist involves financial education. I think this is one of the reasons they don't teach financial education in the schools, because the banks do not want you to fully understand how their system works.
So everyone on payday goes and puts their money in these banks, or a pension, or a life insurance policy, or whatever. Nobody pays attention to what happens next, because what happens next is actually debt. So if you put a whole bunch of money into a bank, let's say a bank's sitting on $100 million of deposits in a month, that's a liability because they owe you interest. So they have to put it out, they have to place it. So the bank now has this issue. They either, if they don't place it, they actually owe you interest on the money, and that becomes an expense to them. If they lend it to a guy like me, then all of a sudden the bank makes that spread.
So if you put $100 in the bank can loan out, 7 or 8 times that, even though they don't have it in their vaults. Why? Because they know you're not going to come back and get your money right away.
That's how money's made. They're basically taking the working class's money and loaning it to guys like me in the form of equity and debt. So that's how debt works.
I thought as a kid, grandma puts in $1,000 to the bank because she wants it safe, and then the bank will take that $1,000 and loan it. But little did I know is that with the bank heist is that it's not grandma's money anymore. Grandma put up $1,000, but now the bank can loan out $10,000 on that $1,000. I think it's even higher now than a 10-to-1 ratio. But they can leverage it out just because they said they could, because they've lobbied and now they can. So then they loaned me that $1,000 that wasn't even theirs in the first place, that didn't exist until I borrowed it. The money never existed. Think about that.
I've heard this time and again over the years, but somehow it's finally setting in. How the hell can the banks just do this and conjure up money?
Banks in practice actually can lend out far more than $10 to every $1 because a lot of the actual more esoteric, like engineered stuff, the designer securities that they create have a lot more sort of borrowing inside them that you can't even really see. So even if there's a regulation that exists that requires them to not lend more than $10 to every $1 that they have physically accounted for, they actually lend way more.
They want you to understand that you can have a checking account, a savings account, and a mortgage, maybe a money market account. They don't want you to fully understand the fractional reserve system, the interaction with the Fed and the banks. That is something that you're going to have to gain on your own because the banks do not want you to understand how the system works. The more people who do not understand how our financial system works, the better it is for the banks.
Money doesn't exist until you borrow it. Poof, then it appears. And when I pay it back, poof, it disappears. That is a heist. I mean, that's Merlin's magic. It's like, really? This is the system? Why don't they teach us this in school? Because if they did, there would be a revolution.
People say, live debt-free. Well, if everybody did that, our economy would collapse because we have to have debt. Without debt, the economy stops. So what I do is there's good debt and bad debt, and what I learned to do was learn how to use debt to get rich.
Most people think of debt as a four-letter word, but there is good debt, money that you borrow that actually makes you money, versus bad debt, things such as credit cards, car loans, things that take money out of your pocket.
Most people without financial education are using debt to get poor. So that's why there's a lot of people who look rich. You know, they have a nice house, nice car, kids in private school, but they're flat broke. If they stop working, you know.
Taxes and debt keep us all running in the rat race. And without some basic knowledge and some awareness of the system, we just keep running and running. But if taxes and debt are not enough, then there's inflation, which the Fed tries to manage through interest rates.
The money that is sitting in a savings account, anytime that loses value, it won't lose the number of dollars, but the value of those dollars begins to disappear with inflation. And it's a way to infiltrate without even having to enter the vault. If you can take away the value of that money, you've stolen it without even having to dig the tunnel and break through security. And that's how the bank heist works. It's by printing money, causing inflation, and the reduction of the value of that money sitting in the vault. They don't even need to break in to steal it.
Should we be concerned? It seems the Fed, the government, and the banks are all together on this. It's ironic to think that our whole economy is dependent on everyone being in debt. The one thing traditional wisdom advises staying out of. So this isn't just a credit card. It creates money by creating debt. Don't think this is just semantics. It's important to realize the difference because it's a key part of the game.
When I give you credit, I give you the power to purchase something. So credit is power. Debt is the promise to pay it back. So those who can print money, the credit, have the power over those who borrow it. And the only way this economy can survive globally today is we have to have more debt. Because if we stop borrowing money, the economy collapses. So that's a long way of saying when they couldn't find anybody else to screw with debt, they say, oh, we have all of these students. So in 2009, the US government took the power of issuing student loan debt from the banks like Wells Fargo and Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. and they gave it to the Treasury. So the U.S. Treasury in 2009 started issuing student loan debt.
Debt, the school loan debt, oh my goodness, it's crippling people today because they don't know the basics of money.
Student loans is the elephant in the room of every conversation when I'm talking to my colleagues, because I know that all of us in the room at one time had to take out student loans, and we were faced with the burden of paying it all back.
Hey, students, we'll give you all of this credit so you can get that college education. And now it's 1.5 trillion and climbing.
It's very ironic because there's so much greed on the whole student loan debt side, but then we don't teach kids about money in school to learn how to handle it.
I had no one to help me through what they call the FAFSA or the financial aid packet, or walking me through government loans or bank loans or private loans. They just told me, hey, here's are the options. If you want to graduate, here's what you're gonna need.
So here's this 18-year-old kid signing up for an average of about $45,000 worth of debt. They'll never pay it off. Most of them will never pay it off. We screw them for life. Just because the government, which is the banks and all this, is so desperate for us to get into debt.
When I graduated from college and graduate school, I was faced with this mountain that was about $65,000. My first job out of graduate school was $39,000. So I now realize that my student loans was more than I was making. And I realized there is absolutely no way I can pay this back in my lifetime.
So they're screwing the kids, through student loan debt. They're screwing the old guys like me through pensions.
Is a pension good enough in today's world? Is that salary until you retire good enough in today's world? I don't think so. I think we have some challenges coming up, and the pension crisis is just upon us. And so I think that you have to take steps now to realize that some of these things that our parents and our grandparents talked about, having a safe, secure job, having a safe, secure pension, just aren't part of our upcoming landscape.
One of the ways our wealth is ripped off is via our pensions. So, let's say I graduate from college at 25, or school, I start working at 25. I give Wall Street my money for 40 years till I'm 65. Guess what? It doesn't have to be there. They can take it.
In the book, Who Stole My Pension?, I talk about what I term gross malpractice generally practiced. And that is that most pension funds are grossly mismanaged. And they lie about their performance, and they lie about the fees they pay. And so it's very difficult for investors to be comfortable that the retirement promises that have been made to them will in fact be kept.
The idea of retirement is a new idea. 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, you died on the plow. Cradle to grave, you worked. You're in the coal mine working until you die, or you're in the sick bed and your kid takes care of you if you're lucky. In the late 1800s, there was a company called American Express, and there were no credit cards then. They were a courier like Federal Express. They had a rail system, and they'd take parcels around. And they offered the first pension. And they said, look, work till you're a certain age and you'll be vested, and then this is key. And then when you retire, we'll give you a pension. Now, you'll never be rich. You'll never have abundance, but you'll have survival. And that's an exchange that many people will take. Fast forward to the 50s and 60s, there was a company called the Studebaker Company, and they sold cars, and they failed to innovate. They had horrible financial problems, and they would go to the unions and say, look, we can't pay your pensions, we got to renegotiate. And the union said, no, we're not going to renegotiate. They go, we're going out of business, which they did. And now you had this problem of all these people that worked all those years expecting this promised income to come in, not there. If you look at the business level, you have companies like Hostess and GM and Delta, United. They go bankrupt because they could not pay people that didn't work.
Well, pension funds are under attack in America today and have been for decades now because they're costly. You should assume, if you're in a pension, that people are working on cutting your benefits. You can be certain that there are human resource and finance consultants meeting with your former employer, working on how to screw you out of your pension benefit. Because any legal means they can to increase their bottom line, they're going to exercise.
There, at every level, business, municipal, state, and federal, the idea of providing for people that no longer contribute is very difficult to do. And you're like the Studebaker Company, or you're Detroit, or San Bernardino as a municipality, and you have firemen and policemen. You have people that you owe money to that you cannot pay. It is so nice to just declare Chapter 11 and say, well, we're bankrupt now. Well, they didn't go out of business, didn't they? The Chapter 11, and in the municipality level, it's called a Chapter 9. Those bankruptcies sever those promises to those working people. They sever them. Detroit took it clear to the Supreme Court. They say, you can't mess with these pensions. And the Supreme Court said, actually, the law says you can. It's called bankruptcy. And yet, there still is a Detroit Police and Fire. There still is a United Airlines and a Delta Airlines and a GM. Bankruptcy severs the promises of pensions.
When corporations are under financial distress, they can go to the federal government, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, and seek to dump their pension obligations onto the federal government, which is ultimately taxpayers. And thousands of American corporations have done that in connection with their bankruptcies and emerge leaner, meaner, and more financially competitive.
Easy not to think about this when you're young or middle-aged, but what about your parents, your grandparents? Have their pensions worked out? Would you be comfortable with their situation? Will that even be an option for you?
When pensions are taken over by the PBGC, the pension benefits don't disappear, but they're typically reduced significantly, say 50% or more in certain cases for high-income workers such as airline pilots.
So more and more we're going to hear about all these pensions going bankrupt. And it's due to the Fed and the government and Wall Street as all part of GRUNCH, Gross Universal Cash Heist.
Pensions are based on company money invested in a Wall Street fund. It's the interest earned from those funds that pays retired workers what they were promised. So for 20 or 30 years, Wall Street has use of that money, charging fees to do so. But when the day comes to start receiving your monthly pension check, well, that all depends on that fund's performance, how it was managed, and a lot of that hinges on decisions made by the Fed.
It's the Fed that is causing the pensions to go bust. And they keep dropping those interest rates. A pension runs on approximately 7.5% return. If they're getting a 7.5% return, the thing works. Money come in and money going out, you pay the pension. But it's basically a Ponzi scheme. You need the new money coming in to pay the old money going out. But when the new money coming in is less valuable, 2%, but your bill is 7.5%, you're going broke.
Pensions, or defined benefit plans, don't seem to have a bright future. Lots of companies no longer offer them. Their replacement has been the 401k, or defined contribution plan. Now it's on you to determine how much and what to invest in your retirement.
If there is a gross universal cash heist, the 401k would be a prime example of that type of a heist. One of the people I read a lot is the late John Bogle, and the words he uses are robbery and tyranny. He didn't say people were bamboozled or hoodwinked or lied to or tricked. He says this is robbery.
Well, the great 401k experiment, it's safe to say, has been a dismal failure. They were not intended to be a comprehensive retirement plan at all. 401ks were originally created to be sort of bonus plans or profit-sharing plans for generally senior executives or senior employees of companies. And workers were told that 401ks would provide the same level of retirement security as a pension. That's what they were told since the 1970s. It's simply not true. The success of an individual's 401k depends upon their income, how much they contribute to the 401k, the investment decisions they make, the costs. It is a very difficult process to master, and very few do.
Now retirement goes from being a function of income that's someone else's problem to provide for you. That's your problem. It has not worked, and when it doesn't work, Wall Street will look at you and say, well, why didn't you save more? Why didn't you give us more of your money?
So the premise that workers who are working 40 hours a week have time to study the financial markets and become skilled in financial decision making is just fundamentally wrong. Most workers have saved very little in their 401k plans. Your average 65-year-old has, by my estimate, maybe $75,000 in retirement savings. With $75,000, you're looking at earnings to supplement your retirement at only a few $100s a month. So the question is, who can retire on, let's say, $500 a month?
Once you're retired, the company says, not our problem anymore. So now I have this nest egg that is really an hourglass, and the fear people have is that they'll outlive their money. Isn't that sad? That most people, their biggest fear in retirement is that they'll live too long.
Wrongdoing in the money management industry is pervasive, because if you are given somebody else's money to handle for decades perhaps, you will at some point, chances are, start thinking about ways of making that money benefit you personally. So it's not the case that there are a few bad apples on Wall Street. It's an industry that is full of bad apples. It's an industry where people are motivated by greed, and if they aren't, their employers are, and they're told to maximize the bottom line.
No one's ever knocked over an armored car for hundreds of billions of dollars, have they? It is a grand cash heist. It is universal, because it's not just the United States. You have RSPs in Canada, you have supers in Australia. So if there is a grand universal cash heist, one of those examples is Wall Street and fees and 401k.
This Buckminster Fuller idea of grunch keeps coming up, and it makes sense. What I like about Fuller is that he's not just giving us an excuse to feel like victims. He sees the bigger picture, which involves purpose, and gives a benevolent path to prosperity outside the heist.
He wrote many, many books. I didn't understand most of them, but I understood grunch is how the ultra-rich, beyond the Fed and all those guys, rip us off via our money. Once I read Grunch, my rich dad and my poor dad came together. I understood it. My rich dad always says, don't work for money, because our money is toxic. And Fuller was saying the same thing. So I studied with him 81, 82, and 83. And each time there was some experience, and a shift in consciousness. And I realized, as Fuller says, you do not belong to you. You belong to the universe. He says your true purpose may be forever obscured to you, but you may rest assured You are fulfilling your true purpose if you commit your life to the highest advantage of others. I always remember that. So I realized that basically I was pretty greedy. I was just trying to make money for me. And I knew it was over. It was time to get on with my purpose in life. And I said, I'm going to find a way to teach GRUNCH to beat GRUNCH. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way.
Robert found the way and has shown it to thousands over the past 20 years. Through books, games, and seminars all around the world, he shares what he's learned about financial health and the importance of financial IQ.
So one of the reasons I think financial education is more important than ever today is because in these times, unfortunately, so many people have had a wake-up call. And where they thought they had their safe, secure job, all of a sudden their businesses are closed. And many jobs are not coming back. And people are now trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? The opportunities that they thought were there are not there anymore. So this could be, we often say in a time of adversity, it could be your greatest opportunity or it can be your greatest upset.
Now, with artificial intelligence and the flattening of the job market, you have to be prepared to look elsewhere to secure your financial future. And I think the key is financial education.
Financial IQ is the ability to control your cash flow. If the cash is flowing out, how do you turn it to have it come back in?
A statement of cash flow in a business or a household is simply a record of cash flowing in and cash flowing out as expenses.
If a person does feel they like to take responsibility, if a person does feel that I don't want to be a victim, there is an avenue, and you can learn and you can change your life. You can get it done.
When Robert and I got together, one of the first gifts he gave me was not like a piece of jewelry or lovely dinner, champagne, nothing like that. The very first gift he gave me was an accounting class. And this is after I'd graduated college, about 5 years. And he said, I want you to take this accounting class. He was somehow involved in it. And I'm like, oh my God, I promised when I left school I was never going to set foot in another classroom again. I did not like it. I didn't like what I was being taught. And he said, no, just humor me and just go to this class. Well, this class was very different because it was an accounting class, but it was very hands-on, very interactive. We were in teams. We were building a lemonade stand. You had to buy product. You had to market. You had to sell. You had to account for everything. And it was competitive. And it was really, really fun. And that's actually where my financial education started. But even more important than that, it was where my love of learning got ignited again.
So far, we've been focusing on what's wrong with the system and how we get stuck in it. Now, I'm looking for what we need to get unstuck, to build a solid foundation for financial freedom. Let's dig out of this mess.
So the definition of an asset is something that puts money in your pocket whether you work or not. So I have 7,000 rental properties. Every month I get a paycheck. My house is a liability because the cash is flowing out. It's that statement of cash flow that determines the asset or the liability.
Essentially, the way it works is if you can invest in something that produces cash flow, that gives you the income that you need, you can cover your monthly expenses.
The rich don't work for money, they work for assets because that is the proven path. They've always had their assets work for them.
It's very important to understand what type of assets you want and what an asset does. And I think the ultimate asset is like a goose that lays the golden eggs. Some people think it's the egg, and I suppose there's some truth to that too. But when you can find an asset that produces and that is a generator of cash flow, I think you've really found an asset at that point.
There are 4 basic asset classes. Commodities, which would include oil, gold, silver, oranges, pork bellies. Stocks and bonds are paper assets. You have a brokerage account with paper assets, shares in General Electric, bonds with Tesla. Those are paper assets. Then we have real estate assets, the actual land and building that constitute a parcel of real estate. That's a real estate asset. And then we have business assets. An operating business that you run and manage is another asset class.
Look at your personality and your strengths and your desires and your passions. One says, well, gee, do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur and start a business? Or would I rather just buy one, like Warren Buffett? Do I like real estate and the lever of debt? Can I stomach that, or do I understand it? And do I like the idea of some commodities to hedge a dollar or to hedge a currency?
Knowing that everything falls into just a few categories certainly makes investing seem more doable. First thing to figure out is which asset classes are the right ones for you.
I'm asked which asset class you should invest in. Should you invest in all of them or focus on one of them? And that depends on what you like to do, what you feel comfortable with. I personally invest in real estate. I understand real estate. I don't understand the stock market. I don't invest in the stock market. So it's what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to learn about and what you're willing to invest in. You've got to take that first step.
Some people never buy an asset. They're afraid to buy a share of stock. They're afraid to buy a piece of real estate because what if I lose money? And that goes back to their mentality of thinking, what if I lose money? Because a lot of people think investing is very risky and very scary. And we say investing is not risky. It's the investor, the uneducated investor, that is risky.
Now, you need to have the education to invest in them, and plenty of people are going to read books and go to seminars, but at some point, you actually have to invest in the asset. All right? Too many people are involved in what's called the paralysis of analysis. They want to understand it so well that they never take a risk. Know that you're going to make some mistakes. That's okay. When you're starting out, it's fine to make some mistakes.
It's not something that comes naturally. I think you have to be open to the fact that you don't know everything. And I think you have to have a little humility, and you got to kind of check your ego at the door. And I think a lot of times people don't do that. I lost a whole bunch of money in the stock market. I invested in gold mines and lost all of that. You know, I've invested in real estate and lost money as well. And I think that had I had better education, asked better questions, then I probably would have not invested in those kinds of things. And today, there's just so much great information out there. Never, ever has there been a better time to learn online.
But the average person hangs out with a financial planner or a stockbroker or a real estate agent or an insurance agent, and they learn nothing because they're salespeople. Nothing wrong with salespeople, but they don't value the importation of knowledge into your system.
We live in an advice culture where people want to know what to buy. Tell me what to buy, tell me what to buy, tell me what to buy. I get it all the time. Andy, what do you like? You like gold right now? You like Bitcoin? What do you want to buy? But very few people are looking for what lessons should I look to learn right now. It's a different context than advice. The advice culture makes Wall Street rich. Unfortunately, I think people, when they think paper assets, they think, well, that is Wall Street, and it's not. Wall Street's about advice. They're about something called assets under management. Their goal is to manage the money for you. So when a person begins to learn about paper assets, they usually start with stocks. They say, well, I'm going to own a share of a company. If I own a share of Coca-Cola, I'm in business. And I don't need to trust Wall Street to manage that for me. I can get the dividend without fooling around with those guys.
How do you measure your personal economy is a financial statement. So when people ask me, because right now I'm about $500 million in debt, $500 million. I said, how do you borrow $500 million? I said, you've got to have a financial statement. That's what separates the 1% from 99%. So that's why I created the cash flow game with my wife, Kim, in 1996. Because she and I retired, she was 37, I was 47. We didn't have any retirement plans or nothing. People kept asking us, how did you retire so young? I said, well, we tried to explain it, and we couldn't explain it. So that's why we created the cash flow game in 1996.
The scorecard is actually a financial statement. So people learn about a financial statement, income expense, balance sheet, asset liability. They're moving the numbers all the time in the game, so they're learning how money flows through the different financial statements. So just by playing the game a few times, you're smarter than 99.9% of people on the planet when it comes to a financial statement. Years ago, the New York Times was doing a story on the cash flow game. And the journalist called us up from New York, and she said, do you know you have a cash flow club here in New York City with about 1,000 people? And we're like, no, we didn't know that. She goes, yeah, you have one in London. We found one in Singapore. We found one in Hong Kong. And she said, you have these cash flow clubs all over the world. And we're like, what? And the mission of the Rich Dad Company is to elevate the financial well-being of humanity. And the game was meant to go out on its own for people to teach each other. So we started researching these clubs, and we found we had 3,500 cash flow clubs where people would get together. It could be, 4 people, it could be 3,000 people, and they get together on a regular basis and they play the game and they teach one another. And when we heard this and we discovered this, we're like, oh my gosh, the mission is being fulfilled without us, which is like the ultimate.
And so the reason games are the better teachers is because it involves you mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Education is mental. I have to learn. Can I change my thoughts? It's physical. I've got to do something. If I'm learning to play golf, I've got to swing that club. I've got to handle my emotions because, any sport, like you're racing down the hill, it's pretty emotional. That's what you do it for. The thrill, the fear, that all that comes up. And then the spiritual. The spiritual side is how you stand back up, because you will fail.
It teaches people that it doesn't matter what your salary is or what your job is or what your profession is, that anybody can be financially independent at any level. And you win the game by having your passive income from your assets, and an asset is something that puts money in your pocket whether you work or not. So you have your passive income from your assets is greater than your monthly living expenses.
Having a passive income is a smart move. But before going there, it's important to learn and understand the tax implications. There's good news here, and it could play to your personal advantage.
So what do people not understand about our tax system? It's really interesting. We are told that the rich do not pay their fair share, and yet if you look at the statistics, they're paying well over their fair share. They're paying 75% of all tax monies going in. Now, the rich are able to use lawyers and accountants to take advantage of the tax code, and that's legal.
Most of the law is really a guidebook to how to reduce your taxes. You can pay the normal tax rates, be an employee, just go along your life, and you're going to pay normal tax rates. On the other hand, if you actually learn what we want to have done and you go do it, you put your money into business, investing, you put your money into solar, you put your money into agriculture, other big tax benefits. But you put your money where we want you to put it, we're going to give you tax benefits, and you're going to pay less tax. What the government really wants are things that improve the economy. For example, if you build housing for other people, in other words, apartment buildings, then we're going to give you huge tax benefits.
When they're doing tax legislation in Washington, D.C., the rich are well represented in those negotiations. So let's not be unclear about that. But that tax code, whatever it is that comes out, is available to everyone. It is an advantage that we all can utilize. So is it the rich manipulating the tax code? Well, maybe, but it also works to the benefit of the investing public.
So when people say that the rich don't pay their fair share of taxes, what's really happened is that the rich have more money to invest, and when they don't spend that money and they invest it where the government wants, they get tax benefits for doing that.
So they want me in real estate for one reason: I provide housing. If I didn't provide housing, the government have to provide housing. So the government gives us, as capitalism says, we'll give you a tax break if you'll provide the housing for the government.
Typically, the more income you make, the more taxes you pay, but the more assets you buy, the less taxes you pay. The rich don't work for money, they work for assets. And because they work for assets, because they're putting their money into assets, they don't pay tax, because that's what the government wants them to do.
If you're looking for a good tax incentive, the environmental challenges we face are the crisis of our time. World governments are creating huge incentives for green energy solutions to combat this. I came across this Bucky Fuller quote: "We are called to be architects of the future, not victims." Without money, we're victims of the elite, of government, of a job, of a great heist. Architects of the future look for what's essential in the days ahead and pursue assets that deliver on that and are profitable. Fuller called it cosmic accounting.
There's one asset we all share, and that is a healthy, complex organism called Earth. We need to consider that cosmic organism, Earth, as an asset that affects all of us. And so cosmic accounting takes into account the importance of our environment, our climate, the planet we live in.
So when I went to go see Fuller for the first time in person in Kirkwood, California in 1981, the first thing he's talking about is cosmic accounting. Fuller's concern was that we were burning fossil fuels. So cosmic accounting was basically looking at the balance sheet. Here's the Earth savings account, or oil, gas, copper, nuclear. But the liability side is us, and we pay the price with our bodies. The Earth pays the price. There's fires in California, Australia, all over the world. It's deserts forming all over the world, and the oceans are getting warmer.
Society, the industry, has extracted billions and billions of barrels of oil and natural gas and raw products, and has emitted billions of tons of pollution, whether it's CO2, methane, nitric oxides. And what cosmic accounting is all about is balancing the two sides of the ledger. Green energy is still, we're just in green energy 2.0 now, right? And it's been 50 years to get to this point. In the next 50 years, we're going to make quantum leaps to where we're going.
When you think of accounting, you think of double entry, bookkeeping, accounting. It's somewhat boring, right? When you factor in cosmic accounting, we're talking about something that affects all of us. We're in this together. It's important for our future, our children's future, that we pay attention to these issues that Buckminster Fuller found so important.
So the income that we have, according to Fuller, is an endless source of income called energy from the sun, energy from wind, energy from tides rising and falling. Cosmic accounting was Fuller's way of saying is that everything that we need is already here.
If Bucky was alive today, his final conclusion is a net zero world, and we will get there. It's how do we get there to prevent the master crisis, which can't happen if we're not paying attention. The reality of the situation is oil, it is a great source of power. It enabled people to do more with less. It was a great part of the rise of the standard of living. The problem with it was the pollution it created. So I'm going to go online and I sign up to Amazon Prime, I give my money and I'm happy, and I need Aspects products. And I don't know where it's coming from. They don't tell me, but they know. They have all the data. And you know what? I'd like to support the local green energy, which is being built, and the factories. But rather than buying some gadget out of China that is having a huge carbon footprint, now you'll see it in 10 years, Amazon will say, here's the price for this, here's your delivery cost, and here's the carbon footprint, the carbon credit tax. The technology is there that every product can now have a carbon footprint, and you pay for that footprint. Now, if you just like the product coming out of China and you want to support that, that's fine, but you're going to pay for that footprint. That power, it's me and you that decide that. That's how it's going to be.
I think that we're getting to a point where these solutions, these green energy solutions, these other initiatives are just right on the cusp of being identified and pursued and integrated into the economy.
Now, what happens is there's about 5 leading authorities that actually say, okay, according to these principles, this project can get a carbon credit. You get these certified carbon credits. It could be preventing the deforestation and replanting forests, and every year you get credits for making sure that these trees are creating it. Mangrove projects in the ocean, there's blue carbon credits. There's different types of credits. And what's happened now is a carbon credit can be used to offset someone who's produced carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Today, oil companies are aggressively seeking ways to produce carbon credits. BP just spent 4 days. How do we get into this field? Shell has just come out and said, we have to go and balance our balance sheet for every barrel we extract. Well, they have now, it's going to come an accounting footprint. It's going to become a liability to their balance sheet. And that's the only way that the oil companies will make a positive impact, is if it hits their balance sheet.
I have a friend that works at Shell, and all their future activities are related around green energy. So I think the oil companies are starting to realize that, and it's going to be incremental. This is going to be a gradual transition to policies that will be helpful to the earth. It's not going to happen all at once. Our economy couldn't stand the shock of it happening all at once. The fact that we're discussing it, though, and you're seeing changes in the economy to provide for green energy and healthier lifestyles is important. It won't happen all at once, but we're on the path now to pursue that, and I think that's good.
So carbon credits are going to become one of the biggest industries on the planet over the next 20 years. It's going to be bigger than oil. It's going to be way bigger than Bitcoin. Anyone watching this who likes cryptos, educate yourself on this. It's going to be bigger than any other commodity. The S&P 500 companies have already said, we're committing to this solution. And by the way, Biden's already legislated it. It's coming into effect. Prime Minister of Canada has come in and said, this is law. The government of Alberta, the provincial government, the equivalent of the state government, tried to go to court against the federal government of Canada to fight this carbon credit. They lost in the Supreme Court of Canada. Carbon credits are the law. This is the greatest opportunity for a young guy watching this to become super rich and doing something super incredible for the environment. What Bucky wrote back 40 years ago, he was just way ahead of his time. Nobody understood it. The irony of all this, to balance the equation of cosmic accounting, carbon credits is the ultimate solution.
This I do believe. The greatest asset that a person would have is their mind and their creativity. It's an unlimited resource. And when you look at the way man does things, we tend to work from scarcity and depletion. Are we going to outlive our planet's resources? Are we going to pull the fish out of the sea? Are we going to overpopulate? Or, energy, coal in the ground is depleted. And yet we have innovation and technology, and we have solar and wind and these things that are renewable. But I would say, in my humble little opinion, as a non-expert on the ethereal, that our creativity and our spirit and our drive and our mind is an unlimited resource. And I think in God's accounting, it's probably the greatest asset that exists, our ability to create, innovate, and serve each other.
Yes, it seems there's an elite group of people who have all the money and make the rules. But these rules apply to all of us, and we can leverage them to get wealthy and live more freely. Don't wait for others to solve your problems. They won't. We need to get proactive about it and learn the game, master our financial IQ, and create prosperity for ourselves and those around us. Look, you don't need billions of dollars. When your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses, you're free. There are plenty of good mentors out there. Learn the game and get yourself out of the rat race. From there, like many of the people you've met in this film, reach out and help others by teaching them the way. People helping people. People teaching people. That's how we win together.